Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
I was in Srila Prabhupada's darshan room, and it's a really impressive room. About maybe 100 devotees were in there. Srila Prabhupada was sitting on his Vyasa, well, it's not exactly a Vyasa, but a special seat, raised seat. Now, just to Srila Prabhupada's right and a little in front of him was a devotee who at the time I mistook to be one of his personal servants, but it seems it wasn't. He must have been a senior devotee or sorts, who had his japa beads around his neck, and he was chanting like that. When Srila Prabhupada noticed that, he asked him, "Where is your bead bag?" And the devotee said, "Well, it's being washed, Prabhupada." And then Prabhupada turned, as far as I remember, to Harikesh Maharaj. Although, it might, like I say, things get mixed up. And he said, Prabhupada said, "So some bead bags have been given?" And Prabhupada indicated to the next room. And Harikesh said, "Yes, Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, "Well, bring one and give it to him." So then Harikesh, as I remember, he may not remember, or it might have been someone else, came and brought the bead bag, and Prabhupada said, "Give it to him." And then Prabhupada told that devotee who'd been chanting like this, that always keep your beads in a bead bag. He said you should have 2 bead bags, and when one is being washed, use the other one. So that was a small instruction, but it's important. In the early days of the movement, we hear the devotees would keep the beads around their neck, but later Prabhupada introduced more rules.
Some of the women, myself included, we had made some decorations for the top of the altars. There was a concha club, wheel, and lotus. And that was the first time I was ever at a big temple with many devotees. And it was quite an experience. And Prabhupada, when he walked in and he saw those decorations, he sat down on the Vyasasana and he saw those decorations. He asked us to stand up, those people who had made them, and he thanked us. And I thought that was so nice. There was thousands, it seemed like there were so many devotees there, but he acknowledged us and he said, "Thank you very much." And then he had a conversation. He asked, with the whole audience, he asked the devotees there, "Is everybody chanting their 16 rounds?" Just kind of out of the blue, he asked. And he said, "Is anybody chanting their 16 rounds?" Everybody just was silent. No one said anything. And then he asked again. He said, "Is anyone fibbing? Are you sure you're all chanting 16 rounds?" And so then a few hands went up here and there. "Well, maybe I'm not, And in particular, there was one devotee who years later, maybe because of this, I found out was Bhaktidas Prabhu, who was on a ladder next to Prabhupada's Vyasasana in the doorway painting. And so his hand was up. Prabhupada said, he said, "But Prabhupada, I'm, working hard to make Krishna's temple beautiful. And sometimes I'm only sleeping 4 hours a night." And Prabhupada said, "Then sleep 2 hours." He said, "But somehow or other, you must chant 16 rounds." And then he said, "It's not very difficult." He said, "Only an hour in the morning, an hour in the evening. What is so difficult?" And he said, "Maya is on the back side of Krishna. You do not have to go looking for Maya. Simply you forget Krishna, and Maya is there." So that was very sweet.
It was a Guru Puja Kirtan, and I had positioned myself halfway between the singer and Srila Prabhupada. Now, Prabhupada's Vyasasana was to my left, and then the microphone was maybe 20 feet in front of Srila Prabhupada's direct sight. So I won't say the names of the devotee who was leading the kirtan for posterity's sake, but anyway, they had a reputation of being a kind of an orchestrated kirtan approach. And they were very, I would use the word proud of their kirtan, the way they did it. And the kartal players were all really intense, and they had everything orchestrated really nicely. So the singer steps up to the microphone, Srila Prabhupada's there, and Srila Prabhupada was usually very meditative when he sat on the Vyasasana and all the devotees were singing Sri Guru Charana Padma. So the devotee, steps up to the microphone, and he had a good voice. He was actually a good singer and a good performer from that perspective. He steps up to the microphone, and all of his trained kartal players and mridanga players were all around him, and he steps up and he goes, Sri Guru Charana Padma. He was totally into it, and all the kartal players, mridanga players were like totally into it. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting there, and his eyes opened up, and he said, "Stop the kirtan." And everybody froze. The kartal players froze. The singer froze. It's like literally his mouth is open, because I had such a great vantage point. I was not far from him and not far from Prabhupada, and it was just like, stop the film right there in that frame. And just for a moment that seemed like, I'm sure in the singer's mind, an eternity, then Prabhupada said, and Nitai Chand Goswami was standing like in front of me. So Prabhupada went like that. He said, Nitai Chand, you lead kirtan. And so Nitai Chand was like, okay, Srila Prabhupada. And someone handed him a mridanga, and then he started to lead the kirtan. So what I took away from that experience, I mean, that visual is permanently in my heart, because I like to lead kirtan. I have led kirtan before. I've led kirtan for Srila Prabhupada. But what I took away from that memory, as long as I'm alive, is that Srila Prabhupada, first off, was very particular, very concerned about our mood in leading kirtan. It is Jagnai Sankirtana Prayer. It is our sacrifice to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Prabhupada was particular about the mood in which we were approaching the glorification of Guru, glorification of the holy name. So what I do now to this day is I pray to Lord Nrsimhadev before I lead a kirtan. I formed a little prayer that, my dear Lord Nrsimhadev, on the altar of your lap, may I place my Hiranyakashipu-like pride, and may you tear it asunder with your transcendental nails. Because I could see that Prabhupada did not like any trace of pride or any kind of orchestration or seeing it as a musical performance. He wanted it as an act of devotion.
When Prabhupada gave me Gayatri Mantra, so I got first initiated through the mail. And for second initiation, I got to get Gayatri Mantra from Prabhupada directly in Philadelphia. So there was a huge initiation that morning. About 75 devotees got initiated. And at that initiation, Prabhupada didn't like a lot of the names that the sannyasis had picked out. At least 3 times he changed the name. And the third time he looked at Brahmananda and he said, "Where have you gotten these names?" That was a really interesting lecture too. Prabhupada in that lecture was talking about a Jamil, and one of the devotees was reading, the book hadn't been published yet, and they were reading the translation, and they said, a Jamil called out 3 times, "Narayana, Narayana, Narayana," and Prabhupada said, 3 times? I didn't say 3 times. I said 1 time. He said, "Once is sufficient, Narayana." That was in that class. Anyway, during that initiation, Prabhupada changed at least 3 of the names. One of them I remember was Bubrit, and I forget the original name, but when Prabhupada changed it to Bubrit, he said, Bubrit means one who carries all the planets on their head. And the other name the sannyasis had given, he said, that means one who carries a heavy load. But it was really interesting then, we were staying at the home of one Indian family, and the woman had been chanting 16 rounds, getting up early, offering her food for 3 years, but her husband wasn't favorable. And the temple authorities wouldn't recommend her for initiation. So she had gone to Prabhupada personally, and Prabhupada accepted her. The devotees had the atmosphere, the attitude, especially with women. Well, if the husband's not strict, how's the woman going to follow? And Prabhupada didn't consider that. If she wants to follow, she can follow, and he accepted her. And I saw them 20 years later in Vrindavan, and the husband had become a devotee. But that was really, really sweet.
In 1975, he was in Chicago again. So again, we went to Chicago, but this time he stayed in one Grihasta's apartment. And I came to find out years later it was my friend Sundarupa Prabhu, who's now passed away. And so they announced one morning, we need some cleaning crew for Prabhupada's apartment. My hand went right up. And so there were 5 of us devotees that would go over every morning and clean Srila Prabhupada's apartment. And Upendra Prabhu was the servant at the time, and Brahmananda was the secretary. And so we would get a garland. I don't remember how we got the garland, but somehow we were given a garland, and I always was able to secure that garland. And for 5 days, we went over in the morning to Prabhupada's apartment, and Prabhupada would come down from the 2nd floor, and the apartment building is one of those kind that had the glass at the halfway point of the stairs, and then we could see him coming, so we'd offer our obeisances, and then when he came out the door, I'd put a garland on him. So I got to do that for 4 mornings in a row, and the 5th morning, my god brother Bhima Das got that service. And it was just so ecstatic. And one really vivid memory was it had rained the night before, and the ground was a little wet. It was just a very, very light drizzle, if any, that morning. And Prabhupada came out, we put the garland on him, and then we offered obeisances, and he stopped us. He said, no. He said, if you do this in the rain, then you'll become sick, and your service to Krishna will be hampered. And that made such an impact on me that here he was the spiritual master of the entire universe, but he was more concerned about our health and our well-being. I thought that was just so wonderful.
When we were still in Buffalo, I think, we went to visit Srila Prabhupada when he was supposed to come to New York. And we had a big Harinam and so many things. And then finally Prabhupada did come. He was in the loft on 46 2nd Avenue, I believe it was. We saw him there. And one girl from our camp in Buffalo had been kidnapped by the deprogrammers and from the dorm in Buffalo. And she came. She was an initiated devotee, and I think her name was Sadanandini, if I remember correctly. And she came to that loft, and when Prabhupada saw her, he was so happy to see her that he had someone go with a tray of tilak and put tilak on her head. And he welcomed her into the loft and sat her down, and it was just so wonderful. He was so happy to see her.
My father went on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada in Philadelphia in 1975. I couldn't go, but my father got to go. And when he came back, I said, so what did Prabhupada say? And he was just all beaming. And he said, I don't know. I don't remember anything he said, but it was the most wonderful experience of my whole life. So.
Once we were in New Vrindavan, well, my husband was in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada had asked for someone to volunteer to be GVC of India. And Jagadish Prabhu volunteered himself. And when I heard, I was pregnant and I was in Toronto, and I was so upset that he was going to go to India, so I just got in the car and I drove to New Vrindavan, and I went up the stairs and I went into Prabhupada's room, and I was really not happy. And when I left, I heard from the devotees there that Prabhupada, he said, yes, you must get her a nice apartment. She must have a nice place to stay in Bombay. Get her an apartment in Bombay. And then he said to Brahmananda, he said, just see, the power of a woman is in her tears. By crying, she will get what she wants.
The reporter came from one of the Chicago papers to do an interview for no, it wasn't a paper, it was a television station, to do the interview. I think that was the famous, controversy with the women's lib interview. I don't remember which, I wasn't there for that part. But that night, Prabhupada had darshan in his room, and Upendra was very kind to me and let me get in on all these things. And so I was sitting in the room there with a handful of devotees, maybe a dozen or so, and Prabhupada was having darshan, and so then everything finished and the devotees were leaving. And Upendra and Brahmananda and Pradyumna was there as his translator. And Upendra kind of gave me one of these motions. Wait, don't go. So I kind of slipped to the back of the room. And then all the devotees left, and Brahmananda brought in a television set. and he set it up because Prabhupada was going to be on the evening news. Now, I mean, nowadays the evening news is at 11 o'clock, so I'm sure that wasn't the case then. Maybe it was 9 o'clock or something. So they put on the television, Brahmananda sat down, Pradyumna was there, Upendra was there, I was there. There may have been others, but I was not noticing anything except the fact that I was sitting up late watching TV with Srila Prabhupada. And so the first news article came on, and it was about a teacher's strike that was going on in Chicago at the time. And Brahmananda Prabhu, having been a teacher, spoke up. He explained to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, this is about an article. The teachers in Chicago are striking because, and at that point Prabhupada cut him off and said, because they're nonsense and do not know how to teach. I thought that was really far out. And then as the news thing would go on, Brahmananda would give some explanation to Prabhupada and all like that. So finally Prabhupada came on and he watched it, you know, very pleasant. You could see he was smiling, he was very happy with it. And then that was done and we all left. And so that was like, wow, I get this really personal time like that. I just really loved it.
During the class, Srila Prabhupada said, he thanked all you American and European boys and girls for taking so much trouble to come here, which touched me. Prabhupada didn't have to say that. He was thanking us for coming, where we should be thanking him for bringing us here and making facility and for everything. Then Srila Prabhupada said in the lecture, but you will be actually benefited if you take lessons from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami. Now I understood from that Prabhupada wanted us to not waste our time in Mayapur and be frivolous and to really be serious about hearing and chanting there. But at the same time I wondered, how am I going to take lessons from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sanatana Goswami? And then later, maybe, I can't remember, but quite some time later I realized that hearing from Srila Prabhupada speak on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his instructions to Sanatana Goswami, that is the way that we learn from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
And Prabhupada was very concerned about us. Actually, in 1974, we went to Mayapur, to basically the first Mayapur festival. And at that time, I was pregnant. And Srila Prabhupada was so caring that he set up a whole tent where cooking could go on just for myself and other women who were pregnant or had children. He had them make milk special for us and bring it to us in a bucket. And he was very, very concerned that we would be taken care of nicely.
I have another kirtan instance where I was leading. Prabhupada was to, it was again in Vrindavan, Prabhupada was to lecture in Hindi. He had some Indian dignitaries coming, and there was a group. There weren't a lot of devotees around. There were some devotees, because Prabhupada's entire lecture was going to be in Hindi. That was announced. Anyway, they wanted kirtan to be sung while Prabhupada was entering. So I was leading kirtan, and again, kirtan is not something that you get mental about. Kirtan comes from the heart. There's an old Sufi saying that which comes from the lips does not go past the ears. That which comes to the heart, comes from the heart, goes to the heart. So kirtan is meant not to be mental, but I was mental about it. I was also very tired, and also trying to get used to Vrindavan and everything. So I was tired and not really focused. So I was chanting Hare Krishna, and I was thinking to myself, am I chanting good? Am I not chanting? What's going on here with the game? I was just getting really mental. But I was leading, and I was playing mridanga, because I usually played mridanga in those days. Prior to arthritis, I used to play mridanga a lot. And then Prabhupada walked in, and Prabhupada, the kirtan was going, and Prabhupada just looked right at me, and he went, like an orchestra leader, he just went, put some gusto into it. And then I saw Prabhupada with those hand motions, and then all of a sudden, totally off the mental platform, and just went into a, kind of a rip-roaring kirtan, renewed energy, renewed strength, and there was no mental interference.
When we were in Prabhupada's room there in Chicago in '74, and this is on the video, but it was a very sweet conversation. And first, Prabhupada thought that my husband was my father's son. And then my father said, no, this is my daughter. I said, oh. I said, do you have any sons? And my father says, no, just daughters, 3 daughters. I said, oh, only daughters. And then Prabhupada told my father the story of Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu. Basically, he was telling my father that he was a demon. But my father really appreciated it. He really enjoyed hearing the story. And my father said, I have my own religion. Is it all right if I visit a temple if I have my own religion? You know, some places of worship, they only want you to come if you really want to participate. Of course, later my father almost became a devotee, but at this point, this was his first time that he met Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, yes. So just like we're in Chicago, and he was very casual about it. He was like this on a cushion. He said, yes, just like there's so many planes going to Chicago, but they have to know that they're going to Chicago, or else what is the meaning of many planes? He said, so if you know that the purpose of religion is to know God and to love Him, then you can say that there's so many religions. I thought about that for many, many months, how that most religions don't say that their goal is to know God and to love Him. They want to go to heaven or they want salvation. And then my father asked Prabhupada, he said, well, I'm really coming here just to see my daughter and my son-in-law. Is that okay? You know, same kind of question, that I'm not really coming to see Krishna. And Prabhupada said, yes. Again, he was like this. He said, yes. He said, they are loving Krishna. And I'm thinking, I don't love Krishna. He said, chanting and dancing are symptoms of loving Krishna. So they are loving Krishna, and you are loving them, and 2 things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. That was very sweet. That's one of the things that Prabhupada has said that's really sustained me over the years. I thought Prabhupada saw at least the potential that I'm loving Krishna. So if Prabhupada said I'm loving Krishna, someday I'll love Krishna. And it also really guided me in my relationships with my family, especially at the last days of my mother's life, when I was thinking, if I can just get my mother attached to me, and then gradually move that into an attachment to Krishna. And my father also asked at that time, he said, why are you so anxious to give everyone your food, even if they don't know anything about your philosophy? And Prabhupada said, do you believe in infection? Well, my father said, yes. And Prabhupada said, just like if you eat the food of a sick person, you'll be infected with their disease. And in the same way, if you eat the food that Krishna's eaten, you'll be infected with Krishna's disease. So that was really wonderful. And when we walked out of the room, my father looked at me. He said, now I understand why you've joined this movement. This is a genuine holy man. So that was very nice.
After Delhi, Prabhupada went to Vrindavan, and Prabhupada was lecturing at Fogal Ashram. The temple wasn't built, and Prabhupada's house was sort of built. The bottom was there. We were eating outside. It was pretty austere at that time. And Prabhupada was lecturing every night under a pandal at Fogal Ashram. And my son was there and dancing. Prabhupada was leading kirtan, and Nirmal was dancing, and he was playing mridanga. And when the kirtan ended, Prabhupada took off his garland, and he instructed one person to give it to my son. And then he started a lecture. You can hear it, it's on folio. That he started a lecture by saying, see this boy, he's dancing in front of me. He didn't learn that in this lifetime. It must have come from a previous birth. And then he started talking about Maharaj Pariksit and how in the womb he had seen Krishna when Krishna protected him. And then when he came out, he was remembering Krishna from the very beginning. He was always looking for Krishna. And he was worshiping deities from a very small, very, very young age. So that also was very personal for me. But Prabhupada was always very personal. And with my son many times. We were in New York in Henry Street, and Nirmal came in. And he was only like, I think 2, and he had a rash on his neck. So I didn't put any neck beads on him. The first thing Prabhupada said when he saw him is, where are his neck beads? And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, he has a rash on his neck, so I haven't been. He said, then put them loose, but he has to wear neck beads. And then the deity that's presently in Washington, D.C., Madan Mohan, a small, maybe that big, was in the room there, and there was a big Tulsi plant. So Nirmal immediately went over and was looking at the deity, looking at the Tulsi plant. Prabhupada said, "You like it?" He said, "Yes." Prabhupada said, "You can take him. It's yours." Of course, he couldn't take him. He was huge. It was bigger than him. But it was a very sweet exchange, always. And even in LA, I came with my daughter, my third daughter, Nitai, on a backpack. And she started to cry. Or actually, maybe Jagadish was wearing her on a backpack, and she started to cry. And I went to grab her, and Prabhupada said, "Just see, she is her mother's daughter," because she stopped crying. So it was very personal all the time, always very aware of the family and how it fit together and how important it was. He never discouraged, it. Even when I was doing deity worship, we wrote him and asked him, "Well, I'm doing deity worship, I have children." Prabhupada said, just like a busy housewife finds time to take care of herself, put on her makeup, you have to find time to take care of your children and do your seva, do the deity worship. So he told me also, he said the children can start doing deity worship when they're 10. They can polish brass, they can make the garlands, and they can help like that.
One night there was a darshan with one musician. I never got the understanding whether this was a person coming to Krishna consciousness or whether this was already a devotee. I always thought it was someone coming to Krishna consciousness that wanted to use their Western rock and roll guitar style in service to Lord Chaitanya. And Prabhupada was very adamant. And the guy kept bringing the point up 2 or 3 times, and finally Prabhupada said, "No." And he pointed, there was this beautiful picture of the Panchatattva on the wall of his room. He said, "You see, Mahaprabhu, cartels and mridanga, that is all." So there was that.
I happened upon a darshan in Prabhupada's room. I was I don't know what I was doing. Somehow or other I happened to be up there, and I realized there was a darshan going on. It was a general darshan because devotees were just hanging out the doors almost literally. I looked in, and it wasn't I don't think there were any big shots in there, so I thought, well, I can go in too. And there was no space to go, but anyway, I went inside. But it was almost the end of the darshan. But the atmosphere was quite different to the classes, where class very grave and very formal, but Prabhupada was just happy to be with his disciples, and they were happy to be with him. Maybe Prabhupada didn't know them personally in the way that he knew his servants, his GPC men, but Prabhupada was just so happy, and all the devotees were very happy. And I can't remember what was being said. It might even been like some transcendental small talk. And then Anakadundabi Prabhu, who was the British pujari, very tall. He was living in Mayapur, and he came with a plate of the afternoon fruit offering, huge plate. And he was just standing at the door. Or maybe it was the evening, I seem to remember it was after dark. Anyway, he had a big plate of fruit prasadam. He was standing outside the door. And Prabhupada, somehow he looked over, and he said, eventually, because Prabhupada was sitting, just the door was exactly to Prabhupada's left, so at some point he didn't immediately see him. And then he asked Anakadundabi, because he'd come to bring the fruit to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, "Why don't you come in?" And Anakadundabi said, "How can you get in with a big body and a big plate of fruit and so many people?" And then Anakadundabi said, "Well, I'll just give everyone some prasad when they leave." And Prabhupada immediately, a big smile, said, "They will never leave." All the devotees said, "Jai Prabhupada!" And then everyone knew it was time to leave. And they got up. That classic, Prabhupada sitting on his, classic pose, Prabhupada sitting on his gadla, what do you call that? The seat on the floor. Yeah. And with the bolster at the back, leaning back with the one knee up and the big smile, like a classic Prabhupada pose. So later I thought that they will never leave. There's Prabhupada's blessing. No one can leave Prabhupada, even if superficially some devotees appear to leave. But actually, Prabhupada's caught us. We can never leave him. He's caught us in a bondage of love. So that was Prabhupada's blessing. We can never leave. He won't allow us to leave, even if we try our very best. Prabhupada's caught us.
And actually, we had some nice experiences with Srila Prabhupada there, because every time he would come to America, he would always come to Dallas. And he was very interested in the children, and he would be very delightful with the children. Very often they'd go to his room and he would give them cookies, or he would give them rasgullas, which were quite messy, and he would hand them out one by one. I have a picture, a photograph of my 3-year-old daughter, Jugala Priti, who's now 37. And she had gotten 2 cookies, because she would get a cookie, then go to the end of the line and come up and get another cookie, and then go to the end of the line. So I have this picture of her with Prabhupada, and they're both pointing at each other. And she was asking for her 3rd cookie, and Prabhupada was saying, "This is your last cookie." So then she was a shaved head. And then also Jagdish would introduce each child as they came up. He would introduce them. This is so-and-so, the daughter or the son of so-and-so. And they were going online to get whatever Prabhupada was giving out. And Vaishnava, Bhagavan's son, and my son, Nirmal Chandra, they were online, and they were goofing around. So when Jagadish went forward and he said, "Okay, this is my son," and they didn't pay attention. So although Prabhupada was holding out what he was giving, they weren't conscious of it. They were jacking him around. He said, "Just see, they are just like Jaghai and Madhai." But he was always very receptive to the children and trying to reciprocate with them. There's so many times that Prabhupada just gave, cookies to the children, and they just loved him being there and being around. So that was nice. And once we were out in the back, and there was a garden in the back of the temple. It was in someone's house, but we were back there, and Prabhupada was speaking, and there were these cicadas. They make this like 1,000 cricket noise, and the fan was on. And Prabhupada gave instructions. It was just a wall, like one of those pedestal fans. And Prabhupada gave instructions for it to be turned off. So we turned it off, and then the noise continued, and Prabhupada said, "What is that noise from?" Because Prabhupada had thought that the noise was from the fan, but the noise was actually from the cicadas. So then they told him that it was from some insect, and Prabhupada, "Oh, such a noise."
We met with, the Radha Damodar Brahmacharis met with Srila Prabhupada in Atlanta. Tamal Krishna Maharaj wanted all the brahmacharis on the Radha Damodar party to have darshan with Srila Prabhupada. So we went up to his room. We were all excited. All brahmacharis and a few sannyasis were there. So Prabhupada was very happy to see us. As you can imagine, there was 65 brahmacharis, bright-faced, most of them dedicating their lives to book distribution. Most of them, I feel, at that particular point in time, did not think of anything other than being a brahmachari book distributor. So quite in focus. So when Srila Prabhupada was sitting there in his inimitable way, he was very, very relaxed. And sometimes he would put his arm on his head and lift his leg up, and he was just sitting there very relaxed. And he was talking to us. And the one thing I remember, he was glorifying brahmachari. He said, "So this brahmachari life, this is ideal for spiritual advancement. It is a simple life." He said, "You have your cloth, 1 or 2 sets of cloth. You have your chadar. When you want to sleep, you wrap your chadar around you. When you want your pillow, you put your arm out and you sleep with your chadar and your pillow." And he was going on about the simplicity of brahmachari life and how conducive it was to spiritual life. And of course, we were all, Prabhupada was just pumping us up because everybody, we were all brahmachari, we thought we were pukka brahmacharis. And then Prabhupada stopped right in the middle of that. And he got this look on his face, this like compassionate look. He said, but you must be honest brahmachari. He said, if you are not honest brahmachari, then you must become honest grihastha. And that rang a bell in my head so loud, because just the way he wasn't really concerned, kiba bipra, kiba nyasi suja, he didn't really care whether we were brahmacharis or sannyasis or grihastas. He wanted us to be honest in our ashrama and honest in the practice of our devotional service. So that instruction rang so true to me, it still reverberates in my head. Whatever I do, whatever ashram, whatever station of life, I must do it honestly.
Earlier that day, soon after the yajna where I got second initiated, later in the morning, and there's a recording of this, my husband and my father and my son all went to see Srila Prabhupada. And my father brought a big fruit gift basket, like you buy, it's a basket, and then it's got cellophane, and it's loaded this high over the basket. And my father was really proud that generally they put nuts and candy in it, but he had told them only fruit, because he figured Prabhupada wouldn't eat the cooked nuts or the candy. And my father was so happy. At that point, my father was chanting a little every day and following the principles and offering his food to a pitcher and buying some flowers for pitcher he had of the deities. He was coming to the temple once a week for Guru Puja and Bhagavatam class. And he was really blossoming in his life. So he told Prabhupada he had brought the fruits, and Prabhupada said, oh, so many fruits. I mean, it was, this high with fruits. And my father said, yes, only fruits. And then my father asked Prabhupada, and my father was like radiating joy, and he was saying, is it possible to be reborn in the same body? And it was interesting because my father was speaking more about a spiritual birth. But Prabhupada was just explained how in this body we travel from one body to another. He said everyone is taking birth over and over again, even in this body. And when the body's, he said, now I'm an old man and you're an old man, when the body's no longer to be changed. And then we'll die. And it struck me that Prabhupada didn't necessarily answer people's questions the way they expected them to be answered. He answered in his own way. And Prabhupada was just also very friendly with my father. First thing he said is, oh, I've seen you before. My father says, yes, twice before. He said, oh, so how are you now? Like he was meeting an old friend. Very, very warm and friendly, so that you felt that Prabhupada was so happy to see you, and that you were the person he was just waiting to see. How he remembers you, and he had, often when you meet somebody, especially a busy person, you feel like you're intruding on their time, and maybe they're just seeing you out of obligation. So Prabhupada didn't make you feel that way. He made you feel that he would put everything else aside to meet with you and be with you because he liked you so much.
Prabhupada would take the darshan, and then he would come for Charnamrita, and I got the opportunity to be the one with the chandan and put it on his forehead after he took his Charnamrita. And I just here again, it was just a simple little service, but it was one personal thing I got to do for Srila Prabhupada. And then we went down to the Vyasa, and I remember the first day, it was like everybody kind of stood around and said, well, somebody lead a kirtan. Now in St. Louis, I was a kirtan leader. I had a decent voice or whatever, and I knew the song, so I would lead a lot of the kirtans. We shared it around, but it was what I did there. So I thought, well, I'll lead the kirtan for Prabhupada. And Pusta Krishna turned to me and said, no, you won't. I will. I'm the sannyasi. So I felt all right anyway. The next day, a similar thing happened. Prabhupada came and he took the Charnamrita and got the chana, and then I rushed down to offer arti to Srila Prabhupada. And as I got to just about to step on the little grass asana that we had, my godbrother Panchatattva Prabhu slipped right in front of me. Now, Prabhupada's sitting right there. How much of a scene can you make? So I said to Srila Prabhupada, I said to Panchatattva in his ear, out of the side of my mouth, Panchatattva, what are you doing? I've been waiting all week to do this. he turned to me and with complete confidence said, well, then I've got you beat. I've been waiting my whole life. And I had to succeed, you know? Years later, I mean 20-something years later, I came in contact with Panchatattva and I relayed that story to him. And with great embarrassment, he felt so bad and just so embarrassed about the whole thing. And I said, no, Prabhu, no. I said, I have used that story for years as an example of your superior thinking to mine.
We were all staying in one room in the long building, all the women. Pishima, Prabhupada's sister, was in like a mosquito net in the corner with all of us. We were in, the floor wasn't done. They were working on the marble or something, and we were eating out on the veranda. But every once in a while, Pishima would go to Prabhupada's room, and she would never go alone. So she would grab another woman and take them with her, even if there were other people in the room. Still, she would never go by herself. And she had a whole procedure that she would wash you, or wash anything, with Ganga Jal or Jamuna Jal, depending on whether she was in Vrindavan or Mayapur. So she would have a little bottle and she'd wash your hand and then she'd grab you and take you into Prabhupada's room. So on occasion, I got the honor of accompanying her into Prabhupada's quarters. And once Srila Prabhupada was speaking in his room in Mayapur, and he was speaking about how in Vaishnava culture, you can always tell a person's position by the way they dress. And he was saying, you know, for example, the brahmachari, he wears a saffron cloth, and the sannyasi also wears saffron, but because he doesn't have the piece in the back, you can tell one is a renunciate, one is not. And the married woman, she's wearing sindoor in the part of her hair, and she's wearing, a widow is wearing white cloth. And then he said something about how a woman who parts her hair on the side, that is another thing, he said. And then he said, but our devotees, they always dress simply. And so then one Mataji, one of my god sisters, she said, but Prabhupada, what happens if your husband gives you very nice silk saris? Aren't you supposed to wear them? And Prabhupada's response was, you should wear them when your husband is around. He said, otherwise, who are you trying to impress? He said, Krishna is not impressed by silk saris. And so she made a face, and Prabhupada saw that, and he kind of said, you know, with his eyes, what's the problem? And she said, well, you know, she wasn't happy. So Prabhupada said, they should treat all women as mother. The men should treat all women as mother. And again, this scowl kind of thing. So he looked at, I think it was Pushta Krishna Prabhu, or Maharaj, who was there. And he, what's wrong? He said, well, Prabhupada, I think, you know that prayer where they say, whenever I think of sex life, I spit on it? Well, I think they think whenever I think of women, I spit on it. They think that's what it means. So he said, they call them mother, but they don't treat like mother. So Prabhupada thought for a second, and he said, first, let them become free of sex desire. Then let them spit. So that was also very strong there, that Prabhupada wanted us to be seen as mother, not just called mother. If you're from New York, or you know New York, being called mother is not a very respectful term. There's another word that goes with it that usually, but Prabhupada, when he said mother, when he wanted us to feel mothered, or, you know, treated like mother, he really wanted us to be treated like mother. And how a person in the Vedic culture treats their mother is reverential. It's reverential. And so having that feeling would make peace, you know, would make everything worthwhile, wonderful. And Prabhupada treated us that way all the time. And so we never felt, there was never conflict. We never felt bad about anything. Even when Prabhupada told us to stand on the balcony in LA, and, you know, then there was some kerfluffle, and Prabhupada said, just tell them that they can dance on the heads of the men, and then they'll be happy. So, you know, but there's that, the tension comes because of the lack of protection, or the lack of reverence that comes with that motherly exchange. And you can't have one without the other. Sometimes we want women to behave in a certain way. But without that kind of feeling of rapport that comes, or that motherly respect of that you give to a mother, it just doesn't come naturally. It's very difficult to fake it, you know. So I was always impressed with Prabhupada's personal dealings with me and my children.
In one of these Prahlad Maharaj classes, Srila Prabhupada said that a mother feels the pain of her child more than the child personally does, which seems impossible, because the physical pain that is felt by the child, the mother doesn't directly feel that, but the sense of suffering, that she loves her child so much, that even though the child is physically feeling pain, the mental pain that the mother feels because the child is so dear to her, she actually suffers more than the child does. She's so concerned with the child. So Srila Prabhupada, in the same way, was so concerned with the conditioned souls. They don't care. He tells them he tells them that you can become a dog in your next life, and they say, oh, great. And Prabhupada says, well, I give you my blessing. But actually, Prabhupada's not blessing them to become a dog, but he's just trying to do whatever he really is actually suffering. We can understand from this. He actually feels the pain. That we're so dull that we don't feel it ourselves. How Prabhupada feels that we're separated from Krishna. How can you be like that? He's just trying to wake us up any way. Prabhupada is trying to do that.
Again in Atlanta, I was there with Srila Prabhupada, and I didn't get to go on any morning walks. They were kind of restricted. Maybe 4 or 5, handful of devotees went. But I thought what I could do was position myself to at least see Srila Prabhupada prior to his going on the morning walk. Maybe say something to him or whatever. So I was pacing back and forth in front of the Atlanta temple, chanting my japa and kind of keeping a lookout for Srila Prabhupada, and the car came up, so I knew that this was not a bad position to be in. But I was pacing back and forth, so on my back leg of my pacing, Prabhupada he came out, and he walked like the wind. He was very rapid in his pace, so I was on the back end of my leg of japa, and Prabhupada came out, and he went right into the car. And I turned around, I kind of ran, and he was at a distance away, and I thought, oh my God, I missed my opportunity. And so I paid my obeisances, because at least I had a glimmer of Srila Prabhupada for even that fleeting moment. And the windows were up, and I really couldn't see into the car. And I paid my obeisances, and I thought, well, I really missed my opportunity. What happened was, Prabhupada rolled down his window, because I was pretty much, from my recollection, the only one really out there. Prabhupada rolled down his window, and he leaned out, and he waved to me. And then he got back and, pulled back into the car, and he rolled up the window. And I thought, he didn't have to do that. Who was I, this new brahmachari? But he made the effort. And I can understand that Prabhupada was so personal, so personable, so personal, that even he saw one of his disciples, and he just took the time to roll down his window and wave to me. Insignificant as it seems, it really struck a chord in my heart.
I did have one very interesting incident in Dallas. I had a couple, but I became a pujari there. My students were involved in doing deity worship and stuff, and when I came there first, that's what they asked me to do, take care of Radha Kalachandji. So Radha Kalachandji had been installed about a year before, and I was cleaning the pujari rooms and stuff, and I found these eyes, these conch shell eyes. And they were in a box, and they were quite large. And I asked some of the devotees, what are these eyes doing here? And they said, well, Prabhupada originally wanted that Kalachandji should have conch shell eyes. And we thought it looked really strange, so we didn't do it. We didn't put them on. And to me, that just didn't connect. I couldn't, what does that mean? I don't know what that doesn't jive. So Prabhupada was there in Dallas, and he would stay in the sanctuary in the other building upstairs. And so I just took the eyes and I went over there, and Jayatirtha and some other devotees were sitting there, and I just knocked on the door and I went in and I said, And Prabhupada said, yes. And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, you know, I'm the pujari here now, and I found these conch shell eyes, and I heard that you wanted the deities to have conch shell eyes, so I just want to let you know that if you want me to put those eyes on the deities, I will. So Prabhupada said to me, Kalachandji's eyes are fine, just the way they are. So somehow I felt like he didn't really understand, you know, that his instruction hadn't been followed. So twice more I asked him the same question, twice. I said, 3 times in total, I said to him, but Prabhupada, you know, if you want me to put the eyes on Kalachandji, I will. And finally Prabhupada said to me, but I'm Prabhupada, and I'm telling you what I want. Kalachandji's eyes are fine just the way they are. So I was so embarrassed. And when I left, Jayatirtha said to me, it was like you wanted him to yell at you. I don't understand what you were trying to do. And then also in that same room, maybe a few days later or whatever, some devotees from LA came. They were doing a play about Krishna kidnapping Rukmini. And they had an issue because Rukmini was not Krishna's wife in real life. And so the script said that Krishna was supposed to pick Rukmini up by the hand and bring her on a chariot. And they were concerned that how could this man touch her hand if they weren't married to each other? Things have changed a little bit since then. But when they asked Srila Prabhupada if it was okay, Prabhupada's answer was very interesting. He said, Rukmini was no weak woman. She got on the chariot herself and she was driving it while Krishna was shooting arrows off the back. That was his answer.
Also in 75 in New York, as the story I was telling it the other day, and Mahamaya's told the story in her book. There were about 15 or 20 of us there, and each of us remembers it a little differently. But this is when Prabhupada was leaving from the airport in New York to go to London. He had just been passing through New York for a few days, and devotees went to the airport in front of Prabhupada with flowers. Now, evidently, a lot of the cars got stuck in a traffic jam. People went in different ways. So very few devotees made it to the airport. It was a small, intimate group, 15, maximum 20 devotees. I'd say probably 15. And we were sitting with Srila Prabhupada in the VIP lounge, which was under construction. So there were nobody else there. There weren't any other business persons or anything. It was just Srila Prabhupada and us. And Prabhupada was sitting on a sofa. I was sitting to Srila Prabhupada's left. So Prabhupada was sitting in the middle of the sofa, and I was directly sitting by the armrest, and my oldest son at that time was 3 months old, something like that, 3, 4 months old. And Prabhupada was first making what I'd call small talk with the devotees there that he knew well, people like Kirtanananda, Shalavati, Satyabhama. He was asking about their families, how they were doing, what they were doing. It was a very, again, casual, like exchange between friends, and I was wishing that I had that kind of intimate relationship with Prabhupada that the very, very early devotees had. And as I said, we brought flower petals to the airport, so the devotees had put flower petals all through the airport. And evidently the devotees had come in through the back door, because the devotees who'd come with the flowers had normally done book distribution at the airport, and they'd come in the back door. So the flower petals were not just in the main area of the airport, they were all through the corridors of all the offices in the back part of the airport. And there was an airport official arguing with our GBC, Rupanuga, in the back of the lounge about cleaning up the petals. At a certain point, Prabhupada said, what's the problem? And it was obvious the man was really agitated. And Jayadvaita, who was a brahmachari at the time, said, oh, Prabhupada, they're complaining about the flower petals. They want us to clean up the flower petals. And we never cleaned up the flower petals. We didn't think about public opinion at that time. And Jayadvaita said, oh, Prabhupada, there's so many cigarette butts everywhere. And they don't complain about that, but they complain about the flowers. You know, nowadays you can't smoke in an airport, but in those days you could smoke and people would just throw the cigarette butts everywhere. And there was somebody having to go through the airport constantly to clean that up. And then Prabhupada told the story about his godbrothers preaching in Burma and how the local people couldn't tolerate the smell of ghee, cooking in ghee, which is, we think of it such a sweet smell. But they would take dead animals and and preserve them in such a way that their flesh became liquefied, and then they would drink that as a very special beverage. And so the idea of what's night for the self-realized soul's day for the common man. But Prabhupada told that story with such humor. It wasn't that he was criticizing the people, it was more with kindness and love and compassion. But at the same time, it was very light, you know, and we were all laughing.
In one lecture, Srila Prabhupada spoke about the cruelty or how heartless demons can be, and he recounted an incident which I guess you could say it's like an ordinary, everyday kind of incident, but Prabhupada had remembered it all these years from his youth in Calcutta. He saw that one man had cut the throat of a chicken, and his son was crying. And the father said to the son, "Why are you crying? It's not, it's fun." And probably in the next, I'm just adding my own little thought here, that probably in the next generation, the son who's now grown up, will cut the throat of a chicken and say to his son, the parampara of demons goes on in this way. So in this way, the father was training his child. Anyway, Prabhupada said, he just gave this as an example, that how cruel people can be. And Prabhupada said, when he said the word cruel, he just said it maybe 5 or 6 or 7 times. Cruel, cruel, cruel. He just said it again and again, and each time with more intensity. That Prabhupada was feeling that. How can they be so heartless? Just like that. Who cares for a chicken? Who cares for a chicken? But Prabhupada, he saw that it's such a nasty attitude, and people just take it as normal.
Someone stole money from us, and so we were stuck in Delhi for a while. We weren't supposed to be there. At least we didn't think we were supposed to be there. Krishna had a different plan. So we got a telegram saying that Prabhupada was coming. And so Tamal Krishna Goswami sent the telegram, and Tejas, who was the president there, asked me to make a Vyasasana in Delhi. And he said it would be easy because we were in India, you know, they know how to do these things. Yeah, right. So anyway, I went around, did what he said. I went to the different places and I ordered things in inches. And of course, they translated everything into centimeters or meters or whatever they did. But when Prabhupada was coming in 2 days and I went to pick up everything, everything was completely haywire, different, crazy. The pillow was this thick in depth, and you know, it was like a football. It was like an American football. That's what it looked like. And it was purple with white squiggles on it. And we had made an umbrella. That came out okay. And some bolsters. And we were supposed to get a big wooden asana, but it turned out to be like a cocktail table with tiny little squiggly legs. And so we were frantic. And we were up all hours of the night fixing it and taking the cotton out and working with a hand crank sewing machine. And when Prabhupada finally came, we had to nail the cushions onto the wood because the bolsters would fall off. There was no sides or anything. And so when Prabhupada walked into the room, he looked at the thing for a few minutes. It seemed like forever. I don't know, maybe it was a couple of seconds, but he stopped and he looked at the thing. And there weren't any real stairs. It was just only 6, 8 inches off the ground. And I was standing way in the back, ready to cry at any second because I was devastated by the whole experience. And so then Prabhupada said, "Who has made this?" And Tamal Krishna Goswami very kindly said, "Laxmimoni." And so Prabhupada sat, and when he sat on the cushion went, you know, it just like flattened, and it made this like almost like a whoopee cushion noise. And I was standing there, and he looked at me and he said, "Thank you very much." What I appreciate from that is that Srila Prabhupada, first of all, he saw only the good. He saw the effort. You know, he saw that I had tried and that I had wanted to serve him. I had an interest in making him happy. And even though the material energy didn't cooperate, he saw the effort. So that was the first thing I saw. And then I saw that Prabhupada wasn't dependent on anything that we could do to be satisfied, because Prabhupada was completely satisfied. And he was happy to see that, that we were greeting him, that he had an asana, that we had a temple, that the deities were there. And he didn't really need a big chair or a small chair or a purple chair. It didn't really make any difference to him. He was happy. And it was very rewarding for me, because I had never really, the mood in India was different. And I had never really been that close to Srila Prabhupada. I mean, I had seen him a few times, maybe more than other people, more than other women, because Jagadish was GBC. But in India, somehow Prabhupada was very easily accessible. And he was very friendly. So it was nice, it was kind of like a thanks a lot,
As the Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party, we had to meet with Srila Prabhupada. And this time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj wanted to give him a donation from the party of $100,000. So it was cash. It was a cash presentation that Tamal was going to make. So what happened was, Tamal had the stack of bills. I think they were $1,000 bills. I don't think they make them anymore, but they were $1,000 bills, and they were supposedly $1,000 bills. And Tamal, Tamal is like your consummate MC. So he said, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees, your disciples on Radha Damodar Traveling Sankirtan Party would like to give you this donation of $100,000. So Srila Prabhupada said, oh. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj gave Srila Prabhupada the stack of bills. Srila Prabhupada took the stack of bills, and he like a card dealer, he kind of put them close to his ear and he fluttered them like that. And Prabhupada looked up at Tamal and he said, 100,000? And Tamal got this look on his face, because what had happened is he only had $99,000, and Tamal, in a panic last minute, had a devotee run to the bank and change another $1,000 into a $1,000 bill, but he forgot to put it into the stack. So Srila Prabhupada did that little, and he looked at Tamal, he said, 100,000? And Tamal got this look of panic, and he went to his pocket, he pulled out the other $1,000 bill, and he goes, and he gave it to Srila Prabhupada.
During the festival in Vrindavan in '76, there was a big sacrifice. Big means many devotees received initiation. I was sitting there for Brahminical initiation, or what we call second initiation. So the whole yagya was going on. It was April, and it was hot. Akshayananda Swami was doing the sacrifice. He was sitting in the sun, pouring the ghee, and he was sitting so close. It was so hot. It seems to me I mostly remember the heat, but one other thing struck me. That the whole thing was going on, swaha, 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 and Prabhupada leans into the microphone and says, stop. You don't usually stop in the middle of a sacrifice, right? The traditional brahmanas wouldn't dream of doing such a thing. So Prabhupada indicated to the back of the area in which we were all sitting, the courtyard of Krishna Balaram temple. And Prabhupada indicated there was one young woman with a child on her lap. The child was maybe not more than 1.5 or 2 years old. Prabhupada said, this child has his hand in his mouth. He's contaminating the whole sacrifice. Take him out, wash his hand, and teach him not to put his hand in his mouth. Continue. Swaha, swaha. Prabhupada was concerned. Now, sometimes we think that these rituals, well, they're just some rituals. You just do them somehow or other. But Prabhupada was concerned that there's ritual contamination. It's a ritual, and there's ritual contamination. The sacrifice, the offering to Vishnu will be impeded. Krishna is not pleased. if we don't follow the rules and regulations properly. The sacrifice has certain rules and regulations. We should follow that. And we may think, well, it's just a young child, but young child or whoever it is contaminating. Prabhupada said, train the child. Don't put your hand in your mouth.
While we were there in Delhi, like I was saying, that house had a servant's kitchen. It was a tiny little thing. It was very, very small. And it had numbers up on the wall with lights, and so that people could press a button in their room, and then the light would go on and the servant would know what room to go on. So it was Nityananda's Trayodasi, 1974, and I was in that place in Delhi, and I was cooking for Srila Prabhupada. I didn't know how to cook at all, but somehow or other I got the service of cooking for Prabhupada. And it was Nityananda's appearance day, so I asked the devotees, is Prabhupada going to eat breakfast today? And they said, no, he won't eat because it's a fast day. So I didn't make breakfast. But at 9 o'clock, Prabhupada's light went on. And so I went to Prabhupada's room empty-handed. Prabhupada said, where's my breakfast? And I said, well, Srila Prabhupada, the devotees told me that it was Nityananda's appearance day, so you would be fasting. And he didn't look happy. He said to me, fruit and milk is also fasting. So I got something from that too, because I realized that Prabhupada did the needful. You know what I mean? What had to be done for his service to go on, he did it. And we tend to be more constrained by rules and regulations, and to find the balance between those two things, not to throw the rules and regulations out the window, and at the same time not to live in behind iron bars. Prabhupada didn't have a hard time with that at all.
One time I was fortunate enough to go on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada in Central Park. This was in New York City. Prabhupada either went to Central Park and sometimes he went to Riverside Park. This time we were in Central Park and I was kind of in the back. I wasn't able to get too close to Srila Prabhupada, but I was able to hear and to see him. And we were walking down the path, and every once in a while you would see in film Prabhupada would stop and he would say something. So he stopped by a branch that had fallen off the tree, and with his cane he hit the branch and he said, asara. I didn't exactly know what asara meant, but it meant useless. So he said, this branch, it looks like it is part of the tree. It looks like it is alive. The leaves are still on there. But because it is disconnected from the tree, it is now going to wither and die. He said, asara. He said, so these sampradayas, they deviate from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's instructions. He said they become asara, they become useless, because they have disconnected themselves from the tree of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and eventually they will wither up and die.
It's a well-known fact that in St. Louis at that time we were a little crazy about Lord Nityananda's Lotus Feet, the Nitaipada Club and the Lotus Feet Club, and all that history is documented in other places, how some people thought we were a little crazy and off the wall, but most people realized we were just devoted. So anyway, that was at a time in ISKCON where everybody was laminating everything. So I had this laminated picture, it was probably about a 3x5 card, a picture of Nityananda's Lotus Feet. And then I had press-on letters that I had put on it that said, are you ready for millions of moons? Which of course is the translation to Narottam Das Thakur's first line of his song in praise of Lord Nityananda. And so I had this big thing hanging off of my bead bag. And I never knew this at the time, but some years later my godbrother Bhima Das told me about this. I was on one side of the Vyasa dancing, and my godbrother Bhima Das was standing on the other side, and he was watching the whole exchange and told me about this. He said, I was dancing and this was on my bead bag around my neck, and he said he saw Prabhupada's eye catch something. And then he watched and he said he saw that it was in the direction that I was standing. He said, and then he saw Prabhupada lean forward a little bit and squint, and then smile and sit back like that. Now, I never noticed that, but he told me the story, and he said, so he understood then that Prabhupada approved. Prabhupada thought it was nice. We were trying to seek the shelter of Lord Nityananda.
So we met Prabhupada up in his room one time there, and it was supposed to be just a meeting between us and Srila Prabhupada, but maybe 40 or 50 devotees came. And what I heard was that afterwards Prabhupada said, you shouldn't do this. He said, if I'm supposed to meet with someone, I should just meet with that person, not that everybody should come. So in that meeting, my son was sitting on my lap, and Prabhupada was talking to my father about Krishna. And Prabhupada looked at me and said, just like this mother is loving her son without any expectation of return, in the same way you should love Krishna. And my father said, will loving her son help her to love Krishna? Prabhupada said, no. He said, loving Krishna will help her to love her son. And even now I hear many devotees saying things like, you know, the way you love your family members will help you to understand love for Krishna. But that was not what Prabhupada said. He said, no. You have to do it the other way. He said, if you eat good food, you'll have good eyesight. But if you put the food in your eye, you'll become blind. I always got this mental picture of like sticking carrots in your eyes. You know? So that was very sweet.
We were in LA, it was 1974. I was pregnant. Jagadish was Jagadish was coming to see Prabhupada from Toronto because there was one boy who wanted to get initiated. And he couldn't come across the Canadian border because he was a draft dodger. So Jagadish had brought his letter for initiation into Prabhupada's room. And we were there. First, Prabhupada did an arti, or an arti was done for Prabhupada's deities. And Prabhupada was just sitting playing cartels and listening to a tape of himself singing. And then when it was over, Jagadish presented that letter. And Prabhupada said, you should perform this initiation ceremony. Do you know how? And Jagadish said, no. So then he instructed someone, you should give him instruction. And he said to Jagadish at that time, you should learn how to do this ceremony. He said, just like your wife, now she's pregnant. He said, before, she was a young girl, she couldn't have children of her own. But now that she's mature, she's having children of her own. So in the same way, you will become mature. Eventually, you will have children of your own. And you will have to perform this initiation ceremony. So he was telling him then that eventually this would be the way it was done. And that was in 1974.
Another time we were walking in Central Park with Srila Prabhupada, and we came up behind, I believe it was a museum, an art museum, and there was an abstract sculpture there. And the devotees liked to prod Prabhupada a little to get him. And one of the devotees said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, see, Srila Prabhupada, abstract art. Look, this is their attempt at formlessness. And Prabhupada said, but they are using form. They're using form to get formlessness. Just see how foolish. Because they were actually steel girders, and the artist had twisted them up and made it into something undecipherable in the name of art. So Prabhupada made that astute observation. They want formlessness, they want abstract, but they're using form to make their formlessness. Just see how foolish.
One event that really stuck out in my mind with Srila Prabhupada during that Rath Yatra parade was when the carts got to Washington Square Park. It was about 4 blocks out, and Subhadra's cart was stopped for some time. And Prabhupada was curious. He became concerned with, so he said to Tamal Krishna Maharaj, go and find out. And so Tamal Krishna Maharaj got down and went and inquired from whoever, was gone for some period of time. And he came back and he got it. Because I was fanning Prabhupada, I was close enough I could hear these exchanges. And he said to Srila Prabhupada, he said, Srila Prabhupada, the problem is that so many people have showed up for the festival, they don't have anywhere to put the carts. And Prabhupada here again, he leaned back and he smiled and shook his head very much. And I just thought that this was what Prabhupada wanted. Fifth Avenue, most important city in the world, New York, Rath Yatra, so many people had turned out, and you could just see Prabhupada was so pleased by this. And I just remember thinking that, you know, years later as the Rath Yatras would be done, this was what Prabhupada wanted. That's why he was so happy that, all right, there's no room for the carts because so many people have come out for the Rath Yatra. It's like that.
During the Vrindavan section of the festival, after the morning program and after breakfast prasadam, devotees would go out in buses to the various holy places in the broader Vrindavan area, and senior devotees would narrate the pastimes that Krishna had performed there and great devotees had performed there, read from Prabhupada's books, like this. Prabhupada didn't personally go out with the devotees. Now one morning, I believe it was the morning we were scheduled to go to Radha Kunda. Srila Prabhupada in the class, he spoke very clearly and straightforwardly, and I found it a little shocking in the sense, well, I'll tell you what he said. Prabhupada said, don't think that you can imitate Haridas Thakur and just sit and chant. You have to be active in spiritual life. And I was somewhat shocked by that, because I thought, well, why is Prabhupada saying that? Because, you know, we're not going to leave Prabhupada. I was so naive, I guess. But Prabhupada knew that devotees could be attracted into that which might seem good for them, but we should accept that what Prabhupada gives us is good for us, not what we think is good for us. So after the class, I heard that Prabhupada had said something which later I found in the transcribed conversations which supports this. That Srila Prabhupada had said that don't think that you can just go and sit at Radha Kunda and be a Babaji and just chant. Because what you'll do, you'll just eat and sleep and think of women and money and fall down. That women and money means Kanaka Kamini it's a traditional, it's a standard saying. The Kanaka Kamini, money and women, these are the two causes of fall down for sadhus. So, and then Prabhupada said there are already enough hogs, dogs and monkeys in Vrindavan. Don't become another one.
Actually, there's another story in Dallas, now that I think about it, that there was one devotee there near Nasha who had cancer. He was dying of leukemia. And he was very, very skinny and really could hardly do anything. Mostly he was just sitting in the temple and chanting. And it was a long time ago. It was like in 1975, I think. And his parents wanted him to go and get some kind of treatment that would allow him to live for a few more months. He was very reluctant to do it. He didn't want to do it. And Jagadish, again, was serving Srila Prabhupada, and he went in on behalf of the parents and said, Srila Prabhupada, the parents, they're here, they want him to take this therapy. They say that maybe they can give him normal life, a little bit more normal life. Prabhupada's response was, normal life is life without death. Can they give him life without death? He said, the trees, they're standing for 500 years, but what is the value of their life? He said, better he just chants Hare Krishna.
I arrived in India maybe 3 weeks before Prabhupada left. And I was there, and I had the opportunity to meet with Prabhupada on several occasions by the mercy of the Vaishnavas there that were taking care of Srila Prabhupada. So Bhavananda Prabhu was taking care of Srila Prabhupada, particularly late at night. And he asked me, so would you like to chant for Srila Prabhupada? And I said, yeah, I would love to chant for Srila Prabhupada. You know, anytime you let me know. He said, okay, you come 12 midnight, you chant from 12 midnight to 3 in the morning. And that whole day I was so elated. You know, I was just thinking, all it was me sitting in the corner, Srila Prabhupada was lying on the bed, and Bhavananda was doing various things. But it was 12 midnight, it was very, very quiet. The lights, there was hardly any light at all. I could barely see Srila Prabhupada because I was kind of like in the back doorway. And Bhavananda gave me small kartals, and he said, play very, very softly because Prabhupada, you know, should get his sleep. So I thought that Srila Prabhupada was asleep because he was lying very still. It was that late. Bhavananda was tiptoeing around. So I was chanting, and I figured, okay, let me chant something very simple. So I started chanting, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And I was chanting that for a while, and I don't know what possessed me to change that tune. And for some reason, at this particular point, there were always trends and ISKCON Kirtan. So at this particular point in time, someone introduced Brahma Bole Chaturmukhe Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. So somehow or another, I changed to that melody and that particular mantra. And as soon as I got through the first line, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Prabhupada, I thought Prabhupada was asleep. Prabhupada's hand went up, like stop, like a traffic cop. His hand just came from the side of the bed and went up, and literally it sucked the air out of the room. I mean, I could not, because I knew I had done something wrong. I knew that I was going on into this mantra, and Prabhupada really just wanted to meditate it on the holy name. So Bhavananda was there, and he was going like this to me. But he didn't have to do that, because like I said, the air was already sucked out of the room by Prabhupada's hand motion. So I just went right back, Hare Krishna, and I didn't change the melody until the end. I just went all the way through. What I learned from that experience is that to meditate on the holy name, we don't need so many different mantras. And Prabhupada encouraged us to chant the Panchatattva mantra, of course obeisance to Guru, Panchatattva mantra, and to chant Hare Krishna in a simple meditative way, just like Prabhupada did. He didn't use very many melodies, and every time you listen to Prabhupada chant, it was a total meditation, and that's what he wanted to hear, and that's what I got from that experience. Just keep it simple.
I didn't see Srila Prabhupada again until just a month before his departure in Vrindavan. And I think any devotee that was there at the time can attest to the fact that the Srila Prabhupada we saw then, sorry. I think any devotee can attest to the fact that the Srila Prabhupada we saw in Vrindavan then was not the Srila Prabhupada we knew. The last time I saw Srila Prabhupada was this robust, full-bodied, and then when he came to Vrindavan, it was in his final 8 weeks on the planet, and he was completely withdrawn, and it was really a shock to me. But the thing that really stuck with me was that during that time, because I was a pujari for the deities at that time, I was assisting with Krishna Balaram, Noon Arti. And they would bring Prabhupada out, and Prabhupada still wanted to come for darshan of the deities. He was still able to be brought out at that time. And the devotees would dance, and Prabhupada took such great pleasure in that. And to me, that was a real lesson that, like Prabhupada said many times, don't think this won't happen to you. But as it was happening, he was still relishing devotional service, coming and seeing the deities, hearing the kirtans, seeing his disciples dance. These were things that were important to him. Circumambulating the deities, they would take him around in the chair like that. After that, shortly thereafter, two things happened. One, personally for me, I caught malaria and I didn't get out of the room I think I had malaria for a week or two really badly. And then when I did recover from that, by that time Prabhupada was completely bedridden. And I didn't get any opportunities to see him, except that one morning I was called in for doing the quiet kirtan. Hamsaduta Prabhu was leading at the time. And here was Prabhupada laid out, but still he was speaking the Bhagavatam, giving instructions. And we've all seen these tapes, which are just, heart-wrenching when you see them. But here's Prabhupada preparing to leave this planet, but still preaching to us, still giving it to us, still knowing it's what we needed and had to have in his example as an acharya, and teaching us that don't just lay there and die and, you're drugged up or whatever. Grasp onto Krishna and give Krishna. And this is what he was doing all the way to the end. Unfortunately, I didn't have the mature hindsight to stay. I left Vrindavan at that time, went back to America before Prabhupada departed. But, that was my little bit of realization from being there close to Prabhupada's then, that, just hold on to Krishna even at the very end.
In the final days before Srila Prabhupada's departure, it was around 2 weeks before he had departed, my the then GBC of New York, Adhikeshava, wanted me to have some darshan with Srila Prabhupada. I had been moved from New York Temple and taken over the Adhikeshava, asked me to take over the Puerto Rico Temple. So at that specific point in time, I had been moved. It was almost maybe 10 months prior to my last meeting with Prabhupada. So I was the temple president of Puerto Rico. So Adhikeshava arranged a darshan with me, and Prabhupada was very frail at that time and very weak, but extremely lucid. So anyway, they kind of rolled Srila Prabhupada over to the side of the bed. I sat on the side of the bed, and Prabhupada said, "So, what is your name?" And I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I'm Laxmimoni Das. I'm the temple president of your temple in Puerto Rico." He said, "Oh, Puerto Rico?" And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." I said, "Puerto Rico is it's a beautiful island in the Caribbean." You know, like Prabhupada didn't know, but I went on to explain Puerto Rico, and I had heard that Srila Prabhupada really liked Hawaii. He liked the climate and the fruits, and so I said, "Srila Prabhupada is very, very much like Hawaii, but it is on the East Coast." And I said, the weather is always beautiful, there's always a tropical breeze, there's wonderful fruits and flowers. I said, "I think it would be a very, very good place for you to come to recuperate." I said, "It's very quiet, and the devotees will take very nice care of you." And I said, there's wonderful fruits there, and the weather's always fine. So Prabhupada said, "Oh," he said, "Oh, that sounds very nice." He said, "I will come to your East Coast Hawaii." Our East Coast Hawaii. So I was literally thrilled. Apparently, then I left, and apparently Adhikeshava had some continuing dialogue about me, and he said some things to Adhikeshava about me that were very flattering, so I was very happy about that. But I went back to Puerto Rico, and I didn't stay right up until the time of Prabhupada's departure, because it was kind of a new temple, and I was a little bit in anxiety, and I felt that Prabhupada would maybe want me to be doing my service rather than be hanging around. I think that was the biggest mistake of my life. I should have stayed. But anyway, I went back, and when I got back to Puerto Rico, after being with Srila Prabhupada, after having the opportunity of personal darshan with him, having the opportunity of being able to sing kirtan for him at that 12 midnight session, I also had the opportunity to massage his lotus feet while I was there, and to place those lotus feet on my head. After all of this immense amount of good fortune and mercy bestowed upon me by Srila Prabhupada, I went back to Puerto Rico, and the devotees, we were doing lots of kirtan, praying for Srila Prabhupada's recovery. During that time, I received a phone call from a devotee that was living on the West Coast, and he had had some difficulty, and he had kind of strayed from the movement. And he came in contact with another senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada in the San Francisco Bay Area, who had a murti of Srila Prabhupada. Apparently, this devotee was given permission by Prabhupada while he was present on the planet, because he was having so much difficulty, to have a murti carved of Prabhupada, and he told him, to keep this murti with you. It was maybe 8 or 10 inches high, marble, white marble. So I got a call from this other devotee who said he had been to that devotee's house, and he wasn't worshiping that murti at all. And worse than that, he was using it as an incense holder, and it was very, very painful for him to see, and it was very painful for me to hear. He said, "If I get that murti somehow or another, will you take it?" Because he knew me from New York. "Will you take it into Puerto Rico?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "But how? Is he going to give it to you?" And he said, "If I have to steal it, I'll steal it." So I forgot about that conversation, and when I was back in Puerto Rico after visiting Srila Prabhupada, after Srila Prabhupada said, "I will visit your East Coast Hawaii," and I told the devotees this, about Prabhupada left the planet November 14th. In January, I get a call from one of the major airlines, and they said, "There's a crate here for you, ISKCON of Puerto Rico." And that whole incident had slipped my mind. And so they said, "There's a crate there from California." I went, picked up the crate. We took the crate into the van. We brought the crate back. We put it in the middle of the temple room. we opened the crate and we moved all the stuffing, and there was this beautiful murti of Srila Prabhupada. And at that time, the words that Srila Prabhupada had mentioned, I will come to your East Coast of Hawaii. And I realized that Prabhupada, through the manifestation of his murti form, had kept those words, kept his word, kept his promise, and there he was. And to this day, that beautiful murti of Srila Prabhupada is being worshipped in Puerto Rico.
He was so compassionate that he sacrificed everything. He renounced renunciation to come to America. We're all, very ego, oh, let me go to Govardhan, let me go to Vrindavan, let me just chant and hear. But Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, and he was just chanting and hearing. And at 70 years old or 69 years old, he went out of his way, struggled like anything to be able to come to America to give Krishna consciousness. And I was always very impressed with his tolerance, that we did such strange things. I mean, really strange things. So many things. Even in Toronto, we were cooking for the deities little prasadam, because we had little deities. So we were cooking little prasadam, little puris, little samosas, and we were making the offering. We wrote Srila Prabhupada what we were doing. Prabhupada said, what are you doing? Krishna eats like a hungry 16-year-old boy. And in LA, he was watching, and people were going in and out of the altar while the offering was going in. He was asking, what is going on? Well, they were bringing chapatis in, because when Prabhupada was eating, they were bringing chapatis. So we were bringing chapati. No, and then when we were in Buffalo, we were bathing the deities every 2 weeks. We wrote, and we would bring them into the office, Lord Jagannath. We'd put them in a bowl of hot soapy water, dry them with a towel from the Brahmachari ashram. And when Prabhupada heard what he said was, everything you're doing is very nice. You should just do it more often. So what he tolerated for so long until we kind of got up to speed. Now, most devotees, they see everything all beautiful and beautiful garlands, and everything is so together. But it wasn't always like that. And Prabhupada was so amazingly compassionate and tolerant and willing to do almost anything to give us Krishna consciousness. So that was one thing that really impressed me tremendously about Prabhupada. Also his relationship, his connection with Krishna. Krishna for him was everywhere. He didn't need to construct a facility to have a relationship with Krishna. He could have he constructed facilities for other reasons. But for him, he had a relationship with Krishna wherever he was. And he was so relaxed about it. Whereas we were not very relaxed about it. It was very worrisome. Even now, like that, we're very detail-oriented, and it's a tense time. But for him, his relationship with Krishna was as natural as anything, And everything he did was very sweet. We were in LA, in the garden, and there was a meeting there with a bunch of pujaris. Lal Krishna Prabhu was there, and he was, I think, making jewelry at the time to sell to the deity. He wanted to start a business. Prabhupada told him he shouldn't make money selling things to the deities, only he could charge for the the materials. So there was a tension, because some people were thinking, he was thinking that Radharani should never have her hair show, because Prabhupada had told us to bind our hair, and that chaste women didn't leave their hair loose. And so he was kind of asking leading questions, and he was saying, well, Srila Prabhupada, isn't Radharani the most chaste woman? Prabhupada said, yes. And then he said, so chaste women never let their hair show, isn't it, Srila Prabhupada? Prabhupada said, yes. And he said, so then Radharani should never let her hair show? Prabhupada said, no. And then Prabhupada closed his eyes, and he said, sometimes Radharani likes to wear her hair like this. And he put his hand across the top of his head. And he said, with flowers in it. And then he opened his eyes and he said, anyway, you should ask Srimati Radharani what she likes. So that was Prabhupada's relationship with Krishna. It was just, let's ask Krishna what he likes, And for us, it's not like that. Of course, maybe someday, but not at least not for me now. But that was another thing about Prabhupada that was really wonderful for me, was that Prabhupada was with Krishna all the time. He didn't have to construct anything to be with Krishna. So those are two of the things. And the third thing that I liked about Prabhupada was his sense of humor. He managed to, even if he got really angry with you, a few minutes later he'd be willing to laugh at it. And, you know, like when he yelled at me about the eyes, I was devastated. But the next minute he was on to something else and it didn't really matter anymore. And, you know, chant Hare Krishna and be happy.
Prabhupada, even though he was on such an exalted platform, the embodiment of compassion and mercy and kindness to the devotees, and even though he had thousands and thousands of followers and recognition worldwide, I always felt that Prabhupada was the living embodiment of personality, divine, transcendental personality. And it didn't matter how small a devotee you were, how new a devotee you were. When Prabhupada focused his attention on you, you felt that he was with you and he was for you. So that the divine quality of transcendental personality, personableness, always struck me about Srila Prabhupada. And every story I hear is just proof positive of how personable he was and how caring he was. It was said the other day in class that we don't care how much you know, we only want to know how much you care. And with Srila Prabhupada, we always knew that he cared about us. And that is why, based on that, so many devotees have dedicated the blossoming youthful energy that they had to Srila Prabhupada's mission. It was unquestionable because we knew that Prabhupada cared about us. And when he was with us, and he is with us always.
Well, a big reason I joined the Krishna consciousness movement was the philosophy, that the philosophy made a lot of sense to me. And that the lifestyle really gave you a way to be spiritual 24 hours a day. So you could say that I was very attracted to Prabhupada because of what he was teaching, his role as the Acharya, teaching not only a perfect philosophy, but also a perfect way to live the philosophy. But as I said about the first time I met Srila Prabhupada, I saw that he was the Acharya and he was also an individual. You know, we say Guru was one, but still they're individuals. And what I really liked about Srila Prabhupada as an individual was how genuine he was. He was just genuinely, authentically there with you and caring about you. He wasn't putting on any kind of pretense. You know, most people in their social interactions, or we could say maybe all people in their social interactions, we are pretending to be something that we're not. We don't have authentic relationships. Even our most authentic relationships are not fully authentic. We can't really show who we are. Well, first of all, we don't even know who we are. How are we going to show who we are? We don't know who we are. And we're all making this show of, I'm the controller and I'm God in this world. We have our guard up to some extent, and he didn't. And he was just there. I was just there, and this is who I am. And he was loving and casual. What I saw in my personal dealings with Prabhupada, he was very, very casual, very loving, very humorous. And like being with you was the most wonderful thing he could do in the world. That he really enjoyed being with you, that he wanted to be with you. Where do you find that quality of total authenticity with somebody? That's only there when a person has both absolute humility and really knows who they are and is happy with what they are. And Prabhupada knows, I'm a soul, I'm a servant of Krishna, and he's happy with that. He has no drive to try to be anything else. And he has no drive to prove himself to anybody or wonder what people are thinking about him by doing this or that. It was very noticeable. It was tangible.
Je anilo premadana koruna prachu. Anilo premadana koruna prachu.